Bespoke radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right, welcome, Fade to Black. How you doing? Today's Thursday, October 17th, 2024. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. All right, today is my Friday. That's right. Everybody knows that by now. It's my Friday. So I'm getting ready for a very, very, very busy weekend in front of me. I wish, I work through every weekend, and once in a while, I have nothing planned. Not so the case this weekend. So there you go. We're wrapping up another busy, great week here on Fade to Black tonight. Michael Schratt is with us. Monday, we had Lyle Blackburn in here. Tuesday night, Earl Gray was with us. Wednesday, last night, Lisa Smart was here, the Final Words Project. Tonight, Michael Schratt is with us. We're going to be talking about UFO crash retrievals, and which is the hot subject right now in our UFO community because of all of the revelations that we've all always kind of known. Right. There has been so many reports historically of, big names of cases that you probably don't know or are not as aware of. But it's always been there. It's always been there. But lately, there has been a lot of revelations, and certainly over the last 7 years, and then 5, and then this month. Right. It's pretty nuts. So Michael Schratt is here. We're going to be talking about the best evidence for UFO crash retrievals. We're going to go through all of those. I'm going to pick his brain a little bit. He's a great friend. I've known him for a very long time. And in the interest of transparency, I live a pretty private life. But once in a while, I will invite somebody over to the house. Michael Schratt has been here, and that says a lot. I trust and admire his work. So we'll get around to all of that. Now, a couple of things this weekend. On Sunday, I'll be posting. I'll attempt a live stream. I'll certainly shoot a video, but I'm going to go on a ride with a bunch of a couple of hundred other Harley riders, and it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be many hours long, and that's happening on Sunday morning. So I'm excited about this, right? Yeah. I'm gonna wear my cut, my vest, and go hang out and be one of the guys and gals that is going to be involved with this ride. So that is Sunday. I wanted to mention this, and I've been meaning to get around to this, and then we'll get straight to Michael. Now this is a public service announcement. I use Notepad, Windows Notepad, Microsoft Notepad, whatever it's called, for the show. And I have done it since the beginning of the show. So I have Notepad where I write and have my show notes and everything in Notepad. And I used it for Coast to Coast and all the TV, any prep that I do. I always do it in Notepad. There's reasons why, but also I have a complete file of every show on anything that I've ever done. That's the radio, TV, film. Everything is there. Everything is archived, right? Okay, so I know it's a basic program, but it is a tool. It's something that I don't know if I could run without it, right? If there was something catastrophic that happened. Like they stopped at Notepad. But anyway, because of its simplicity, it's one of the things that draws me to it. You can do very little with it as far as settings and preferences. It's just a place to take notes and run with. It's in front of me right now. Okay. So I use it every day. Use it for the news and use it for the show. And about a month ago, and I'm not sure exactly how it started, but it might have been in a Windows update where if you went out of Notepad, wherever you left off, went back and did something, and then went back to it and clicked on it, it would click in what was appearing to be a random area. Now, my Notepad is already pre-set up for the show. It's probably 15 pages long. And it would just go to some random thing. And I would have to scroll back to where I was and then click and then input whatever I needed to do there. Then I would go back and click. It would go to some random, and it became this intrusive. It was insane. It was adding probably an hour or two to my productivity for the day. It was insane what I was going through. Suddenly, it stopped. I did everything I could to try to fix it. And now it started working again over the weekend. It's back to where it was. Has anybody else experienced this? I went all over the web. I found a lot of people complaining about it, but there were no cures. It was very, very strange and very frustrating. Yesterday, today's Thursday. It fixed itself over the weekend. So for the first time in what seems like a month or two, I've had a joyous week. I'm literally dancing and happy because of Notepad. And that's how technology has taken over our world. Why? Because we backwards engineered Notepad off of the Roswell craft in 1947. I'm going to blame it on that. I'm going to blame it on the aliens. All right. Tonight, Michael Schratt is here. We're talking about UFO crash retrievals, and we're going to go through the most compelling UFO crash retrieval cases in history. We're going to go through his research, other researchers' work. We've got slides and illustrations that we're going to do too as well. Now, if you're listening to the show without video, listen to me. Come back and go to our YouTube channel. You will be able to see everything there for free. And that's it. And also on the podcast version of this show that doesn't have video, we have other video archives. But if you're listening to the podcast, head over to our YouTube channel. It's easy enough to find, Fade to Black Radio. And you will have all of the illustrations if you need them. Okay. All right. So he's a private pilot. He's a military aerospace historian. He specializes in mystery aircraft, which I've gone through with him a lot. I thought I knew my aircraft. Michael and I sitting on my couch and getting corrected by Michael because I identified a plane incorrectly is one of life's greatest pleasures. He really knows his stuff. He knows his stuff about things that are hidden within the military industrial complex. He's spoken at events all around the world. He's been on TV, radio, podcast, everything that you can imagine to help spread the word and support this community. I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black, the one and only Michael Schratt, and he's right there. Michael.
Hi, Jimmy. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm not embarrassing you, am I? We're friends.
No. You're not.
Don't tell him I've been over at your house. That's secret stuff, man.
No, it's okay.
I evaded the men in black to get there, Jimmy. And but there you go, Michael. Let's start here.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of shows together. We've done a lot of things together over the years.
Sure.
But here we are with all of the research and everything that you have done, and you've been presenting and talking about this subject, and I'm talking about crashes, retrievals, and of course backwards engineering. Your professional background is in aviation and aerospace. And did you ever see a time where this stuff is so forward in the community, in the media, Washington, D.C., of course, our community and whistleblowers, where these subjects are being spoken about out in the open? Flying saucers in possession of the United States government, backwards engineered. That's pretty nuts. Did you ever see a day like this coming?
Well, Jimmy, it's good to be with you. The giggle factor is definitely decreasing, but we're not there yet. What we need is the hard physical evidence. That's what we need.
Well, you're talking my language, right? Now, before we get started, let's talk about Immaculate Constellation for a second. Cool story, right? It's a cool story,
right?
Because that's kind of what it is, because it lacks the substance that would propel it forward. Names, dates, places, evidence, the whistleblower, who is that? And hidden inside of this story where it says, well, nobody knows about this project. It was created in 2017, but Congress doesn't know. Senate doesn't know. President doesn't know. In fact, nobody knows about it. And there are no. Is that more of the same? Is that an example of what you're talking about?
Well, the recent UAP legislation, which recently got axed a second time, you can see what they're doing here is they're kicking the can down the road. And that's why we need to take the bull by the horns and make a management decision. And that's what we want to do here tonight.
Well, when you, in your estimation, I should say, if you are protected as a whistleblower,
okay,
and you go down that route, shouldn't the public know the whistleblower's name? And the accuser or the accused should be able to know the whistleblower's name, right?
Well, that's the whole concept behind open congressional hearings. And but we're not there yet. We had congressional hearings last year, and what has become of it? We're still almost exactly where we were before. We've made some progress, but we're still not there yet.
What's your thoughts behind Immaculate Constellation?
Well,
and by the way, is the name too big for the DoD? They're usually not that sophisticated, right?
I don't think so. I mean, many code names have two words to it, but one thing Jimmy, is that the shorter the code name, the more classified the program. So if you have Leo, that would be higher classification than Forest Green.
Bingo.
Mm-hmm.
Bingo. Yeah. Michael Schratt bringing it. That's a very important point. And I'm going to say this. If I was naming my project, I'm going to name something that I don't have to spend 5 minutes typing.
Right.
Because you gotta type that out, right? Leo, bingo, right? Project Sign, Project Grudge, or whatever. That's easy.
You remember where you used to live, Jimmy, right in Burbank, when who company used to have a classified program, they never stamped the documents top secret. That way no one knows if it's classified or not.
Yeah, that's the see, hiding in plain sight, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna ask you something really quick.
Okay.
You know where I live. And you know my proximity to Lockheed Skunk Works. It's 1 mile from my house, right? It's right there, right? Okay.
Yes.
So it's been about 3 months. About 3 months ago, after the show, I went outside. I wish you were here. Man, I wish you were. You would have just loved this. Anyway, so I go outside to watch the meteor shower that was happening. At that time. And I was upstairs on my second floor balcony facing Skunk Works. And I walk out on the balcony and I look up and, I see a couple of meteors and I was like, wow, they're going. This is cool. And while I was doing that, and I had my binoculars, I had my night vision, and then this object catches my eye, and it had been up there the whole time. I had seen it, but I didn't pay attention to it. I'm watching the meteors. And then, but the object, as it's going to my left, which would be heading north, it's going to my left. It's about 1,000 feet off the ground, maybe 2,000, not very high. But it stops and then backtracks on itself. That caught my attention. So I look at it, and then I notice that the lights on it were all white. It had 3, were strobing. All 3 were strobing. There was no blue, no red, no green, nothing like that. It was just white. And I watched this thing zigzag right above Skunk Works, and it's in this like area. It's not going out of the area, but it's going across, going around. But a couple of times it came out over my house, pretty directly over me, and I got a really good look at it from underneath. And it was 3 lights, triangular, equal. I'm not saying the craft was a triangle. I didn't see the craft, but it was totally silent. And I thought at first when I saw it, I thought it was a helicopter, but I didn't hear any motors or anything like that, or props or blades. Anyway, so when it came over me and I'm looking directly underneath it, it was, again, not very high. I'm going to guess and say 2,000 feet, but it was probably 50 feet across. It was good size. And then I watched it go back. It was very smooth. And it's just like cutting back on itself and doing all of these patterns. Then it came back again over my place, like it was showing itself to me. But I looked right up underneath it. And then it went back doing its thing. I watched it for like 30 minutes and I got bored. And I went into the house. The next day, it popped up on social media, UFOs over Palmdale. And there were a couple of videos. I think the videos were CG. I think they were fake. They were not what I saw, but my name was in the comments in the thread. This is what Jimmy Church saw. And it's not what I saw. What I saw was only white lights. And they were talking about 6 objects. I only saw 1, and I'm not going to turn this into something that it's not. But and I'm not saying it was ET, but it definitely felt experimental, or something was being tested, because it was completely silent, nothing, and it was good size. Have you heard of anything like this? Does that ring any bells for you?
Well, as you know, Air Force Plant 42 is ground zero for the military-industrial complex. So it could have come from Boeing, could have come from Lockheed, could have come from Northrop Grumman, one of our black triangles. Difficult to say.
Yeah. Air Force Plant 42 is right there. You know, it was just bizarre to me. I wish, Michael, that I had something to add to this. I don't. I can only tell you that it was silent. It was level. It never banked or did anything like that. It stayed level like this, but it was the lack of noise that was pretty strange, pretty impressive, and it was pretty good sized. Now, is it possible to have blades or props that are stealthy, that are silent? Are those something that are manufactured?
I think we're talking about a different type of propulsion system here. Yeah. If it was a ducted fan type situation or a drone, you probably would have heard that. Although at 2,000 feet, it's a little bit difficult to say for sure. Yeah.
It was a pretty good sized craft, though. It wasn't like, it was this big, or it was a few feet. No, it was good size. It was good size. Big enough to put somebody on, for sure. It was a good sized craft. But you haven't heard any reports of anything like this. And again, what does 3 white strobing lights tell you, and no navigation lights?
Well, three lights are consistent with what we know about Belgium Triangle 1989, and also what was seen January 5th, Southern Illinois, Flying Triangle, seen by at least 4 to 5 police officers. So they all had that same triangle configuration with the white light below. And then when these things departed, they departed like a spark on a grinding wheel and left no sonic boom whatsoever. So this is 89, 90, and also in 2000.
Yeah, and I didn't see anything crazy. Like it didn't dart, it didn't fly out into space. There were no lasers coming to the ground, or pulse weapons. And there was nothing. I don't have anything like that to report. There wasn't any super fast erratic behavior, although it was I would say the speed was almost the same in whatever direction it was doing, but it was backtracking on itself, and it was just zigzagging right there, just literally above Lockheed, and right behind Lockheed is Air Force Plant 42. That sits right there too as well. So from my vantage point, it could have been either. I always say Lockheed because people know what that is. Most people have never heard of Air Force Plant 42. Yeah. All right.
That's where the magic happens. Yes.
What's that?
That's where the magic happens.
I went out there. Well, I'm out there all the time. But I took James Fox out there and went up to the gate right there, Air Force Plant 42, the gate. And there are the signs for it and all of the warning signs and the barbed wire. And you can see that they have 2 security gates in a row that you have to pass through before you go out there. But you look at the hangars. This is the crazy thing about Air Force Plant 42. And you can see this from the fence line. No cars. No cars. You can see the buildings, right? You can see the gate. It's massive. Not a car. Not a single car.
Yeah, what is that? What is that tell you?
Yeah. It's weird, man. It's weird. I've seen U-2s out there. The U-2s are parked there quite often. And again, I don't want to give away any national security stuff, but I see the U-2s flying overhead. You and I have talked about this before. And for me, as an aviation person, seeing a U-2 in flight is a pretty cool thing.
It is.
And yeah. And so I've seen that. And the other day, and then we'll move on to crash retrievals right now. Check this out. I've seen a lot of cool stuff out here. This is one of the coolest. I'm on my bike. I'm going past Northrop Grumman, and I'm on Columbia Way is the name of the street, and which borders that whole complex. So that street is probably, 4 or 5 miles long. And I see something on the runway. It's black. But I'm doing 70 miles an hour, right? So I got to watch where I'm going, but I want to see what's on the runway, right? So I take a quick look, and it's black, and then it's a U-2 taking off, right? Very cool. So I'm going down the road. I take another look, and the U-2 takes off. It's very slow, turns, and makes a U-turn. Now it's flying with me, and it goes out in the same direction I'm going in, turns around by the time I got to the next light, and landed again, and then took off, did a touch and go, went up, did a U-turn. I make a left turn. I'm now in front of Skunk Works, and I'm watching it, and I watched this thing do like 3 or 4 touch and goes. Now tell me, is that like the coolest thing ever? Right?
Nice. It was spend an afternoon. Yes. Yeah.
It's just amazing. It's got such a unique sound to it. It's a low rumbling. It's not a high pitched jet sound. It's like a freight train. It's got a weird sound to it. It's got a really weird sound. All right. Let's get started with these cases. And we're going to start with 1946.
We can start with 1946. We'll have a couple of quick announcements here. All right, so why don't we go ahead and begin here? This presentation is called Retrievals of the Third Kind, Cosmic Crashes, Corpses, and Cover-Ups. And I want to go over and start here. UFO crash retrievals, the ultimate holy grail of UFO research. Now, why am I calling it the ultimate holy grail of UFO research? It's very simple, because the crash retrievals have the craft, the bodies, and they have the debris all wrapped up into one entity. And this is going to be the vehicle that facilitates disclosure. This is going to be it. We need the hard physical evidence. We don't need any more CE1s or CE2 cases anymore. We've got thousands of cases of lights in the sky. You can go back to the flap of 52. We've got hundreds and hundreds of those cases. We don't need that, because if we don't really track down these legacy witnesses, we're all going to be here another 50 years and we still won't know what's going on. So that's why it's incumbent upon us now to track down these remaining legacy witnesses, and it's the crash retrieval cases that are going to get us there. A couple of quick announcements here. The content of each case highlighted in this presentation has remained intact per the description of the original source. Number 2, the identity of first-hand sources will be protected per Leonard Stringfield's original agreement with his military contacts. Number 3, visual aids used in this presentation are computer-generated forensic composite illustrations and sketches, which originated from the specific details provided by Leonard's sources. So, Jimmy, I want to give you and your listening audience the source material where Leonard Stringfield came up with all his firsthand military witnesses. Who are these people? Well, they're 3-star U.S. Air Force generals, U.S. Air Force fighter pilots, astronauts, commercial pilots, air traffic controllers, neurosurgeons, pathologists, theoretical physicists and mathematicians, U.S. Army officers, U.S. Navy officers, military police, high-level Pentagon officials, top military brass, scientists and engineers who worked at Wright Patterson Air Force Base and other government facilities. So these are the credible firsthand military witnesses that were identified by Leonard Stringfield, who not only loaded up the craft on 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy trucks and shipped them to Wright Patterson Air Force Base, but these are the people involved in the autopsies, the pathologist reports, the X-ray technician reports. These are the type of people we want on our team here. Let's continue on. A couple of quick quotes. Number 1, UFO crash retrievals can't be real, because if they were, I would have read about them in the local newspaper. That's the first one. Second one, there are not now nor ever have been any extraterrestrial visitors or equipment on Wright Patterson Air Force Base. This is their official press release, Jimmy, July 1980. This is what they're saying. They're claiming that they don't have any bodies or debris on the entire Wright Patterson Air Force Base. So what we're going to do in this presentation is we're going to take Leonard Stringfield's witnesses and we're going to go up against the United States government, and we're going to see who kind of comes out on top here. All right, so I want to introduce everyone to the man of the hour here. This is Leonard Stringfield. Over about a 30-year period, he collected dozens and dozens of first-hand military witnesses who dealt with the bodies, who dealt with the craft, who were involved in the retrieval operations. These are the people that Leonard had dealt with. A couple of quick bio points here. He was born in 1920, grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. By the time he graduated from high school in 1939, he'd already memorized the entire dictionary. Jimmy, do you know what they called him? Do you know what they called Leonard? He had a nickname.
I don't. Lenny?
They used to call him Webster.
Yeah, Webster.
Because he memorized the entire dictionary. So this is the exact type of person you want to be compiling these witnesses. He joined the military as soon as he heard about the attack on Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. After the war, he was employed by a chemical company in Ohio and retired after 30 years. Leonard wrote 2 books. Number 1, Inside Saucer Post 3-0, 1957. Later in 1977, he wrote UFO Siege. Okay, now the next bullet item is the one we want to drill down on tonight. His lecture on UFO crash retrievals at the 1978 MUFON Symposium in Dayton, Ohio, caused an international sensation. Now, why is that the case? Okay, it's simple, because back in 1978, this whole concept of UFO crash retrievals was a new concept back then. Roswell was just getting on the radar screen, so this is all new material. Now, the other thing is, the agreement Leonard made with his firsthand military witnesses is he could preserve an important part of our national history by bringing light to their cases. However, the names had to remain under wraps, and that's where the pushback came in at the MUFON Symposium, because there was no way to independently verify what Leonard was saying. He would not release the names. And he took those names all the way to his grave. And that's the agreement that he made. And that's why witnesses felt comfortable coming forward to him, because they knew their identities were safe with Leonard. He passed away in 1994. We'll continue on here. This is Cincinnati Enquirer, July 19th, 1993. It says, author continues quest for truth about UFOs. What I've collected has staggering implications for mankind. This would be the biggest thing since Christ, really. Yeah, it would be. That's a bold statement. But if we could get even one of these cases to be authentic, it would be an absolutely historic event. I also want to mention that there were 22 bank boxes of original testimony, drawings, sketches, letters, names, dates, locations. This is the kind of material that would need to go to open congressional hearings. So I want to mention that as well. Now, for anyone who wants to know where I got the information for the cases that we're going to be going over tonight, this is the book right here. It's called UFO Crash Retrievals, the Complete Investigation Status Reports 1 through 7. So it gives you the dates, it gives you the location, it tells you how the tractor trailer got to MacDill Air Force Base or got to Edwards North Base Complex. It gives you all the intricate details about the entire retrieval operations. Now, I don't know if people can see this, it might be a little bit hard, but as you go through this book, and it's not for the faint of heart, you have to be really interested in this subject matter. I mean, you really have to have an interest in this kind of subject matter. As you go through this book, you're going to find out that there's no drawings, there's virtually no pictures, no illustrations. And so what you're left with, Jimmy, is you're left with coming up with what these crash retrieval cases actually look like in your own imagination, in your mind's eye, which is not technically a bad thing, because we all have our own imaginations. We all can kind of view what we think this thing might actually looks like. However, I wanted to do a deep dive into Leonard's publication with a fine-tooth comb, like word for word, go through every single case, pick out the most mission-critical cases, commit them to number one, a refined drawing based on the military witness testimony. Number two, a full color rendering using the refined drawing as a template. And so over the past 4 years, I've made that my crusade to commit these to drawings and illustrations. And that's what I want to go over with your audience tonight here. Also want to mention Ryan Wood, Magic Eyes Only, Earth's Extraterrestrial Encounters with Extraterrestrial Technology. This is something that Ryan had wrote a little over 20 years ago. He updated it with this volume. So now if we hook these two books together, you've got 119 cases of UFO crash retrievals in Leonard's publication. And then you've got an additional 104 cases within Magic Eyes Only. So now we're pushing 200 cases. And to be conservative, if we only eliminated 50 of these cases, we're still left with 150 crash retrieval cases here. Now, I want to take your listeners, Jimmy, to Las Vegas. I want to take them to Las Vegas. Now, we already know that we've got 119 crash retrieval cases. So let's go to a roulette wheel at one of the big casinos here. And let's just say it had 120 spaces on it. And we bet a chip for each 119 crash retrieval cases. And I think you kind of know where this is going. Jimmy, we can't lose. We can't lose. The numbers are in our favor. All we need is one of these to be authentic. And the whole concept of UFO crash retrieval non-existence completely falls apart. So really, the numbers are in our favor here. I want to give credit to Rudy Gardea, my sketch artist, who did the drawings to make all this come alive. So let's go ahead and begin here. This is UFO crash retrieval 1942 at an Army base north of Georgia. Even Leonard didn't know where this was. I'm going to give you the page number. It's page 319 in the book. Now, this craft measured about 15 feet wide. It was 10 feet high. It had a series of hieroglyphic type markings wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself. It had 3 levels. Upper level had a display panel, which you can see in Rudy's bubble enlargement drawing there, a display panel with buttons and switches. That was level number 1. Level number 2 had what looked like a wraparound window. And in back of that wraparound window, there was what looked like 4 bar stools. That's level number 2. Level number 3 had an entryway hatch. Now, according to the report, there were 4 crew members taken alive, 5 feet tall, 90 pounds, large black eyes, milky white skin. Let me go to the next slide here. This is a blow up that gives you a little bit more detail on this hieroglyphic type markings seen along the bottom circumference. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because this isn't the only instance of these markings. I've got 4 other cases within the Stringfield collection where they're on the inside wall of the upper dome. We're hearing about writing. So by default, Jimmy, there absolutely has to be, by default, a transnational team of linguistic experts and engineers who are documenting this, who are trying to decode what all this means. There has to be. They've got to have thick 3-ring binders of all this. This must be going on here. Here's my full color rendering just to give people an idea of what this may have looked like. And this is long before Roswell. This is 1942. When this craft came down, it hit the side of the facility and made a hull breach on the side of the craft. So it ripped open the craft here, according to the eyewitness here. Now, let's go to the next one. This is 1946, Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. Back in 46, as you know, it was known as Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. It had not become Wright Patterson Air Force Base until September of 1947, when the U.S. Army, U.S. Air Force was its own entity. Right. Our primary eyewitnesses were an avionics mechanic and his 6-year-old son named Tex Martin. So we've got 2 witnesses in this case. This is UFO Crash Retrievals. This is Leonard's book, page 242, 243. So if anyone wants to follow along, those are the page numbers. Now, what I've got here is a period correct photograph depicting hangar complex number 4, and it has 5 bays. Bay E is the one on the far right. I believe it took place in this hangar right here. Now, the son, the 6-year-old son, was doing really good in his grades. And so his father said, why don't you come join me at work today? Actually, the whole week. So he did. And there's an adjoining cafeteria to the main hangar. And there was a janitor who said, you know, this young man looks like a good young man. I'm going to buy him a soda pop. So he asked the father if it was okay. Father said, okay, no problem. So he hands this 6-year-old boy this soda pop. And I'm going to go to the next slide here. And you can see Rudy's drawing. We're roughing out the details. This is not a refined drawing. The second this 6-year-old boy gets a hold of this soda pop, from the inside hangar, the door opens up and one of these military guards comes walking into the cafeteria. And this 6-year-old boy, Jimmy, he's peering into the hangar now. What does he see? Here's what he sees. He sees 2 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy trucks with unknown tarp debris. And they have tarps over there. They have chains. He also said there was an 18-foot diameter dish-shaped craft sitting on the hangar floor with tripod landing gear legs. There were at least 3 ET corpses laying on stretchers on the hangar floor. And he's looking at all this. Now, what we want to do now is we're going to reverse the angle so I can give you a different perspective here. And now you can see our 6-year-old Tex Martin in the background looking into the hangar. And we've got our 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy trucks. We've got our 18-foot diameter dish-shaped craft. We've got the monuments. We've got the bodies on the ground. And so we're laying out all the monuments in rough form. So what I want to do now, Jimmy, is I want to take you to our final rendering, our final refined drawing. And this is what we came up with. This is back in 1946, Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. The craft was about 20 feet in diameter. It had 2 rims wrapped around the outer circumference. And you can see the 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy trucks. And our Tex Martin is in the background. We've got the bodies in the foreground. He said there were at least 3 of them. And the father saw it and the 6-year-old boy saw it as well. So what we want to do now, we'll take this as a guide. We'll take this as a reference. We'll go to the full color rendering. And this is our full color rendering. This is Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, 1946, seen by 2 witnesses. Again, 1946.
Any information about where this craft came from?
No, we don't have that information. Now, the father got in big trouble for bringing his son, number 1, and number 2, seeing what he saw inside the hangar. They definitely saw this. There's a 3-page report within the Stringfield book here that talks about all of the intricate details of this case.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
All right, let's continue on here. Now, same location, Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, 1946. Our source, our witness, is a private who worked in records management. And I'm going to divert from Leonard's book one time and one time only. And I'm going to go to Clark McClellan's book, Space, the Final Frontier, page 59. I'm going to hit you with the cover of the book here. This is what the cover of the book looks like. Space, the Final Frontier. Within this book, there's a sketch from the original source. And this is what the sketch looks like. This craft was highly polished mirror reflective exterior, 15 feet in diameter, 7 feet tall. Jimmy, it had no seams, no rivets, no welds, no socket head cap screws, no hex head cap screws, no visible means of propulsion. There were no seats on this thing. It came from Arkansas on a railroad flat car and made it all the way to Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. And so that's the bottom line on what this thing actually looks like. So let me go to the next slide here. This is my AutoCAD drawing that shows you what this craft actually looks like. Now, if you look at the center part of the craft, there's a central column that was 36 inches in diameter that rose from the bottom of the craft, passed through the midpoint, terminated at the top section here. Now, on the upper right detailed view, Jimmy, what I've done is I've peeled back the skin so your listeners and your audience can see the central column. Now, I want to point out that if you look to left of center line on my bottom view here, you'll see a red dot. That is the attempted point of entry with diamond tip drill bits. I've got 3 other cases within the Stringfield collection where we've got these white lab coat technicians that are desperately, and I'm talking about desperately trying to breach the hull of these craft with diamond tip drill bits, Jimmy, and they can't do it. They can't do it. They can't get inside. So let me go to the next slide here. Here is my kindergarten first pass full color illustration just to give people an idea of what this may have looked like back in 1946. And we'll go to Joseph Race, much better refined drawing. And you can see here, he's pulled back the skin on the upper view here on the right-hand side, allowing you to see that central column. There were no switches. There were no buttons. There were no dials in this thing. It was like antiseptically sterile with no welds or seams. He's also got the red dot on the window just left of center. So that's something I want to highlight as well. Okay, so let's go to Rudy's drawing. So the private record management, he is to deliver an envelope to one of these high-level military brass within the hangar. He's met by his friend who's a guard, and this guard says, you know what? I got something I want to show you. So he brings him in the hangar, and right in the back of the hangar is this craft just sitting on the hangar floor. He said that in the report, there was a tarp that was partially folded up. That's mentioned in the report. In the foreground, there was an open toolbox with an electric drill off to the left and a diamond tip drill bit. So they were changing shifts between these lab coat technicians. And he got there at the right place at the right time and was able to see this. So what we want to do now is we want to take this drawing as a reference, and we'll go to the full color rendering, and hopefully we can make this case come alive. And this is what we came up with Joseph Wright. If we could be back there, Jimmy, in 1946.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. Now, really quick before we move on, because there's the lack of any details on the inside, which includes like an eating area, sleeping area,
Correct.
recreation area. Correct. There's no ping pong tables, right?
Correct.
There's none of that in there. It would indicate to me that this, yes, it was interstellar, but it was interstellar quickly. You wouldn't get bored because you were possibly traveling 100,000 light years in a couple of seconds and not, a million years.
Sure. Or we could be looking at an unmanned drone, possibly. As
or
well.
an unmanned drone. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's really cool. It's really cool.
Okay. So
I mean, what would the windows be for? Why would you have windows if you don't have seats to sit in while you're looking out the windows?
Correct. I debate if they're actually windows.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
See, we see windows.
That's right.
We use the word window. I like that. Okay, moving on.
Okay, so who would have a need to know, 46, 47 time frame? Who would have a need to know? Well, here is the letter. We're all familiar with this letter from Nathan F. Twining, Wright Patterson Air Force Base Commander, to Air Force General Brigadier General George Shulgin, September 23rd, 1947. Here he says, the phenomenon reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious. A little bit further down in this letter, it talks about the form, fit, and function of the vehicles, the flight characteristics of the vehicles. It's a watershed document. It's a very historical document. So Nathan Twining would have a need to know. All right, next one. Papagos Indian Reservation, west of Globe, Arizona, January 1947. This is north of Superstition Mountains. Now, our witness served in the U.S. Navy during World War II. This is page 93, case A10 in Leonard's book. So again, I want to give you the references and page numbers of where I'm getting this information. Okay, so our primary eyewitness, he's with another consultant. They're on a Jeep. They're going down an unimproved dirt road. And all of a sudden, Jimmy, they're challenged by two armed guards. And they're told to vacate the area immediately. However, it was too late because another 100 feet down the road off to the left, they were at the right place at the right time in the very beginning of a retrieval operation. So off to the left, they saw about a 30-foot diameter dish-shaped craft. It had augured in at a 40-degree angle. It had a low-rise dome on top. There were two rings wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself, and then there was these indented windows wrapped around the outer circumference. But they did get to see all of this. This is in the report. So what we want to do is we'll take Rudy's drawing as a guide. We'll go to the full color rendering, and here's what we came up with, 1947 timeframe, Arizona. This is what our witnesses are telling us that they're seeing. And, as we go through more of these, the body count goes up, the craft count goes up, the credibility goes up, because you just can't discount all of these firsthand military witnesses.
Now, for everybody, Globe, Arizona, 30, 40 miles east of Phoenix, out in the desert, past Mesa, Arizona. This isn't the only crash retrieval in that area. I've always looked at the Phoenix, Scottsdale, that whole, because it's wide open desert once you get out there. And there has been many, many, many sightings and a few very significant UFO landings and crash retrievals that have been reported in this area.
Okay, good. All right, let's continue on here. So we talked about the craft. Now I have a side project that I like to do, Jimmy. Is not only do I like to track down the craft and crash retrievals themselves and the bodies, but I also like to track down the hardware. Where did the hardware go that they retrieved? Where did the hardware go? Well, there's one-page report within the Stringfield Dictation Notes collection that talks about something, Jimmy, called Foote Brothers Gear and Machine Company. So according to Robert Helmold, Foote Brothers Gear and Machine Company of Chicago conducted metallurgical analysis on pieces from a saucer that crashed in Arizona back in 1947. So, of course, I started digging. I started investigating. What do these guys do? So here is Chicago Tribune, January 15th, 1955. It says it makes gears as large as 21 feet in diameter and weighing 45,000 pounds, and others small enough to put on a watch chain. Its gears are found on airplanes of all types, including jets and helicopters. In a year, it will make thousands of different gears for use by industry. So, Jimmy, bottom line is, if the government, the military-industrial complex, U.S. Army personnel, if they retrieved an object of unknown origin and it had an arc radius with some teeth on it that reminded the analysis experts of some type of gear, you'd want to take it to this contractor because these guys are pros at this. This is exactly the kind of place you'd want to go.
Well done. Well done.
Yep. All right, let's continue. Now, Hendricks Commercial Register, 1909. You can kind of see what these guys do here. So it's checking all the boxes. This is checking out completely perfectly. one more, purchasing agent, May 1923, just to give you size comparison of what these kind of they make here. This is absolutely the perfect contractor for any type of gear, any type of teeth they might have seen, an arc radius. It would have been sent here. So bottom line is, this is all checking out. Next one, White Sands Missile Range, July 4th. That date is very important. July 4th, 1947. Our witness is a technical sergeant, U.S. Army Air Force, page 196 in Leonard's book. Now, what I've got here is the map of White Sands Missile Range. And where this thing came down was the vicinity of the northern part of the range. And I'm going to go to the next slide here. What actually came down was a 150-foot diameter disc-shaped craft. This was not large. I mean, this is a large craft. It had a low-rise dome on top. It came down on a dune that was about a 30-degree angle. And I will mention, Jimmy, that this took place at night, and they had this whole place excruciatingly well lit. They had light-alls. They had spotlights. They had searchlights. They had people with Geiger counters going all around this thing, checking to see for radiation. They had men with still photo cameras. They were taking pictures of this. They had people with motion picture film cameras documenting the whole thing. So bottom line is, this whole thing was documented in multiple different ways. Let me go to the full color rendering here. So this is what came down July 4th, 1947 at White Sands Missile Range. Absolutely well documented. Mm-hmm.
The day after Roswell.
Basically same time frame. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Same time frame. Now, what's the actionable item here? Since still photography and motion picture film was recorded of this event, senators and congressmen with the appropriate security clearances should track down and utilize this evidence for future public hearings. Now, here's, Jimmy, is where the problem lies, right? Because number one, most of these senators and congressmen, they do not have a high enough security clearance. And number two, they have not been read into these programs. So how can they be, get access to these programs that they're not cleared for? That's the problem we're running into here. That's the problem. Absolutely.
Fascinating.
Okay. Yep. Let's continue on here. Now, UFO crash retrieval, 1947, Jimmy, of all places, a warehouse at Berkeley University. Believe it or not, warehouse at Berkeley University. We've got the name here, Albert Bruce Collins, now deceased. He was a metallurgical engineer. This is page 197 in the book. So our primary eyewitness, he's at the right place at the right time when this 18-wheeler tractor trailer lowboy truck backs into the warehouse at Berkeley University. And what does he see, Jimmy? He sees this. This looks like a large egg about 30 feet across, about 15 feet high. He literally said, quote, it looked like it was a cracked egg, because you could see the interior of this thing. It literally looked like a cracked egg. Now, on the inside, it had a 36-inch diameter central core or yoke. On the forward portion of the craft itself, there was a composite panel. There was another composite panel that wrapped around the outer circumference of this central yoke or core. He also mentioned that there was a hull breach on the right bottom side of the craft with debris and shrapnel sticking out. So we believe there was an internal implosion and something happened and debris was coming out of this thing from the bottom right-hand corner. And he's looking at all this. So he's got about a 2.5-page report that describes this case in great detail within Leonard's book here. Let me go to the full color rendering. And this is what we came up with just to kind of make this case alive. And the whole goal of all this, Jimmy, is to preserve an important part of our national history by committing these to detailed, refined drawings and full color renderings. That's the goal of all of that.
Very tasty. And I know what you're thinking too. Feels Socorro-ish.
Yes, it does. A little bit.
Socorro. Is that a word? Socorro-ish?
Well, you can
it is
if
now.
You want to. Yeah, you can do that. That's
all
right.
This is great. Now, I was just going to bring up Salinas.
Yes.
And what I find, let's go through this case. But okay. Salinas is here in California, off of the coast. You've been there many times. Everybody goes to Salinas. It's a beautiful town. But you're showing agriculture here. It's famous for a lot of different things, but it's also very beautiful. You know what we don't tie to Salinas? A UFO crash retrieval. Tell me about it. This is great.
Okay, so this is Carrot Patch south of Salinas, California, July, August 1947. And the primary eyewitnesses were two 19-year-old workers. And the source is Leonard Stringfield Dictation Notes Collection. That's where I got this information. So you got two 19-year-old boys working in a carrot patch. Now, this craft came down the night before. The foreman saw it. The morning when the two boys went to work, this foreman came over to the two boys and said, hey, I got something that came down last night. I think you better take a look at it. So he brought them over to the craft. This is the original sketch within the collection in the report. It was not a large craft, 9 feet in diameter. It was about 4 feet tall. It had a flat top. There was a double row of indented windows wrapped around the outer circumference. So that's the second time now that I've heard about this double row of indented windows. So this is the original sketch from the report. Now I'm going to go to the map on this one, Jimmy. We actually have a map, and X marks the spot. So if we could go back there when all this went down, I could probably take you plus or minus 200 feet where this thing came down. If we could go back there.
For sure.
X marks the spot. We know where this thing came down. We've got the map here. I'm going to go to the next slide. Here is my AutoCAD drawing just to give people an idea of what this thing looks like. This is not a large craft. It's only 9 feet in diameter. We'll go to the full color rendering. This is the very first pass on what this thing may have looked like. And you can see this double row of indented windows that pops up at least 3 times within the Stringfield cases here. Now, one of these guys was brave enough to walk up to this thing, and he kicked the side of it with his boot, Jimmy. He made contact with it. Within 5 minutes, there was a military convoy of vehicles that arrived on the scene, at least 2 Jeeps. There was a 6x6 covered troop transport towing a trailer, and the 2 boys were told to get out of the area, but they did see the retrieval operation. They actually saw these guys manhandle this craft up onto the trailer, secure it with a tarp and chains, and then they move this thing out of here. And that's
now, what's the name of? It escapes me right now. What's the name of the Army airfield turned Air Force Base in Monterey?
Monterey, I don't recall.
It's closed now. It's decommissioned, but they use it. But it's not that far from this crash site, so I could see the military showing up there pretty quickly because that base is right there. It's just over a couple of hills.
So I'm going to go to the full color rendering based on Rudy's drawing, and this is what we came up with: Salinas, California recovery. So something like this was seen by the 2 19-year-old workers and the foreman. So technically there's 3 witnesses on this one.
Very cool.
Okay, let's continue on. Now, Danny Sheehan, I want to bring him into this because he plays a role in this entire story here. Most people in this field, they know who he is, but he obtained degrees from Harvard University and Harvard Law School. And as we all know, Danny is a very large advocate for UFO disclosure and transparency. So no doubt about it. Back in 1977, Danny was given a one-time only special security clearance to view and investigate classified files at the Library of Congress. And we'll move on here a little bit here. These were the classified files specifically associated with Project Blue Book. And I want to mention that these files are not to be confused with the unclassified Project Blue Book records, which have long since been declassified and sent to the National Archives in Washington, D.C. The photos were accessed by Danny Sheehan at the Madison Building basement during January of 1977 under the direction of the Congressional Science and Technology Committee and Marcia Smith at the Congressional Research Service. So this is how he got access to this information here. So where are the classified Project Blue Book files now? That's the $65 million question.
For sure.
We're going to investigate this here. Now, so 1977, Danny goes to the Library of Congress. Specifically, he went to the James Madison Memorial Building. This is what you see here in this photograph. And I want to give everyone a layout of the land here. So you've got the United States Capitol kind of in the middle of the screen here. Off to the right, you've got the Library of Congress. Just south of that, you've got the Madison Memorial Building. This is where all this went down. So he goes into the Memorial Building. We'll go to the next slide here. He goes into the basement. He takes this elevator down, Jimmy, into the basement. Elevator doors open up. And now he's walking down this long corridor where he is met with 2 security guards. They check his ID. They were expecting him. You know, it is Danny. So he walks into this medium-sized room where off to the right, there's kind of a rolling dolly with some documents there. There's some microfilm reels in a cardboard box that are fastened by a fabric screen. And then off to the left, there's a period correct microfilm reader. So we're going to go to the next one here. And he's looking at these microfilms. And I'm going to move on to the next slide here. This is a period correct microfilm reader. And it dawned on him, and he was thinking, you know, I don't have a lot of time here because we got a lot of documents to get through, and I just can't look through all these documents. I better just look at the microfilm reels. So he opens up the cardboard box. He kind of undoes the little string there, and he starts feeding in one of these reels through the pickup and then brackets it on the other reel, and he's going through these things. As he's going through these pictures and photos and everything, Jimmy, he comes across 3 photographs that depict a winter scene of a UFO crash retrieval. There was a 30-foot diameter dish-shaped craft. It was tipped up at a 30-degree angle. It had a low-rise dome on top. There was hieroglyphic type writing written along the bottom surface of the upper dome. And what you see here on the lower right is the napkin drawing of the symbols that Danny did for me when I was sitting next to him over at the restaurant about 3 months ago. Rudy was with me, and what we were trying to do is get all this documented. And so he did this kind of a sketch. Now, next thing that happened is he knew he was limited on time. So what Danny did is he projected this image of this winter scene. Now, there were 4 men in the scene. 3 of them had still cameras. They were taking photographs of the crash retrieval operation. The guy off to the left had a dual reel shoulder mounted motion picture film camera. He was documenting all of this. All 4 men had winter parkas on with their hoods up. They had that furry flange on their hoods. That's exactly what this whole scene looked like. So Danny projected this photographic scene onto this white plate that you see here on the reader. And then he took his notepad that you see on the upper right, and he started paging through all of the blank pages, and he got to the cardboard backing, laid that down, projected the image of the symbols onto the cardboard backing, and traced, Jimmy, 1-to-1 per scale exactly what these hieroglyphic type writings look like. By this time, it was time to go, so he packed up his things. He's walking out of the facility. He goes back through this corridor. He's met with the guards. They check his ID, and he's let go. He starts walking out this hallway, Jimmy, and one of the guards says, "Hey, stop right there. Don't go any further. What's that?" And Danny said, "Well, that's my notebook." And the guy says, "Let me take a look at that." So he hands the notebook to the security guard, and this security guard starts paging through all the blank pages. Jimmy, he never made it to the black cardboard backing. And so Danny walked out the building with the sketch in hand. So
yeah, it's pretty amazing. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I've asked Danny for that notepad for years,
Yeah.
and he says it's packed away. He knows where it is. He will eventually get to a specific storage unit where it sits. Maybe one day we'll get to see that piece of cardboard.
Sure. It'd be historic. It'd be historic. So what did the whole scene look like, right? So if you look on the bottom, here's Danny's napkin drawing showing you the symbols and showing you the craft. And so sitting with Rudy, we started going back and forth, refining all the details and getting everything laid out here. Here you see Rudy's drawing up on the top. We're kind of getting things roughed out. And this was about a 3-week period to get the details pinned down on this thing correctly. Here is all of the details that we want to include in the drawing. So craft measured 30 feet in diameter, tipped up at a 30-degree angle. Craft had a dome on top with what we talked about before, the strange hieroglyphic type symbols on the upper dome, the lower surface of the upper dome. It left a debris trail on the ground, and then where it stopped, Jimmy, at a 30-degree angle, there was a mound built up of dirt on the right-hand side. The photo depicted 4 men wearing winter parkas with the hoods up. 3 men had still cameras. 1 guy had a dual shoulder-mounted motion picture film camera. Now, he did not know where this took place, and he didn't know when this took place. So I had to use the motion picture film camera, period, correct, to date this, Jimmy, and the best I could come up with is 1948 to 1961 timeframe. That's the best that I could come up with. So I'm thinking that is correct. It is period correct. So all guys in the scene were wearing these winter parkas. They absolutely had the furry flange because Danny said that he could see that in the photographs. He could see that furry flange in the photographs. 3 of these guys had still cameras. So this is a period correct still camera for the time frame. 1 guy, it didn't have a tripod, but the 4th man off to the left absolutely had one of these shoulder-mounted dual reel motion picture still film cameras, and he was documenting the whole scene here. And then this is a blow-up of Danny's symbols that he's got on the napkin here. A friend of mine did kind of a cleanup, and these were written on that upper dome section here. So the refining process begins. So I want to take you through the refining process. So here's where we started. We're roughing out the details. Rudy's got the monuments in place. We've got the craft in place. We've got the men kind of laid out here. Let me go to the next slide. Here you can see this built up mound on the right-hand side. We've got a little bit of a debris trail. We've got the men in place here, just roughing out the details. We'll go to the next slide. This is almost a direct side view. Again, this is rough stage. This is all preliminary. This is not to be taken as a refined drawing. And then we kind of get to this, this drawing right here. Now we're getting really close here. We've got the men in place. We're getting really close. But it dawned on me that we don't have the viewing perspective correct. What needed to happen is this whole viewing perspective needs to be rotated counterclockwise at least 90 degrees, up to and including 120 degrees. So if we do that, we're going to start heading in that direction. This is a direct side view, and we'll keep rotating another 90 degrees counterclockwise, Jimmy. And what do we end up with? We end up with something that looks very similar to this. Now, when we showed this to Danny, he said, yes, this is the correct viewing perspective. We've got the 4 men in place. We've got the dish-shaped craft. We've got the built-up berm and dome section on the right-hand side, the debris. However, our tip-up angle is too high. We need to bring this down another 15 degrees. And I'm going to hit you with the refined drawing. And Jimmy, this is what we came up with. When we showed this to Danny, he said that this is the most accurate drawing with the exception of actually seeing the actual photograph. So I submit that this is just about as good as we're going to get without seeing the actual photograph. Now, this thing has all the monuments in place. We've got the 4 men, we've got the parkas, we've got the furry flanges, we've got the winter scene, we've got the tip-up angle, and we've got the motion picture film reel camera. However, Jimmy, I didn't want to stop just here. I wanted to see if I could take this to the next level, and I wanted to push the envelope, see if I can take this to the next level. So I put out a call across the entire world, UFO crash retrieval illustration contest. And so I had a $100 cash prize. I know it's not much, but we're working on a shoestring budget here. $100 cash prize for the first person that can do a photorealistic rendering depicting this crash retrieval scene based on Rudy's drawing. And I got entries from all around the country. I got entries from all around the world. And I'm going to hit you with some of these entries here. I'm not going to go over all of the parameters. We already talked about this, but it had to be a winter scene. It had to be 30-foot diameter dish-shaped craft. It had to have the 4 men. They all had to have the cameras. So let's continue on here. Now, I want to mention that there is a theoretical limit to what results can be achieved by typing in prompts into an AI image generator. you're not going to get exactly what you want. You still need the human touch because we're just not there yet. The technology is just not there yet. You can type all day long and it will not give you what you need. So what you end up doing, Jimmy, is you end up with a hybrid illustration. You take AI for the background, okay? And then you use 3D Studio Max or another software program to do a one-to-one construction of the craft completely correct per the drawing and original sketch. Then you finish up with Photoshop to bring in your elements, equipment, and personnel. That's how you get to where you want to go. You can't get there using an AI image generator. You still need the human touch. So here was the first pass here. This is by Sean Lenahan. It's an honorable mention. The guy did a good job. He's got the winter scene here. We've got the 4 men. We've got all the parkas are in place. They've got the furry flange here. They've got the motion picture still cameras. He's got the writing on the bottom section of the upper dome. So this is a good first pass. Let's go to another one. This is by Ben Lewis. Another noble attempt. Guy did a good job. He's got the winter scene. We're kind of heading into this photorealism. We want to make this case come alive. Let me hit you with the next one here. This was my winner. He won the $100 cash prize. So I want to give credit to Skylar Stallings. And this is basically what was seen in the photograph by Danny Sheehan back in 1977. This is just about the theoretical limit of how good we're going to get until we see the actual photograph. So this is the kind of material, the legitimate, actual, not the unclassified Project Blue Book files, but the classified Project Blue Book files that Danny said came from off-site into the Madison building, into the Madison basement area. That's where these files came. Those are the kind of files that we need to get shipped over to the congressional hearings. Now, I had a late entry. After all this was all over, prize was sent out. Another gentleman came back and he hit me with this one, and I want to give this to your audience here. This, Jimmy, I believe is about the best we're going to get. I don't think we can do any better than this. This is at the bleeding edge, the theoretical limit without seeing the actual photograph. And I want to give credit to Dan, and I've got his last name here, but he did a fantastic job just making this case come alive here. And
yeah, pretty good. Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Yep.
Good stuff. Okay, so we have a lot to squeeze in here. I decided I'm not going to do a commercial break. Let's just keep going straight through.
Yep. No problem.
And I think we're at 1948 flying boxcar.
Okay. We're getting there. We're getting there. $64 million question. Where are the top secret files on UFO crash retrievals being stored? So the first question is, where are the files, right? Where are the files? In the Stringfield report, there's a page from a witness who describes where they are. They are kept in 3 large computer banks spread throughout the country. So number 1, Wright Patterson Air Force Base, Dayton, Ohio. That's no surprise. We already knew that. Number 2, CIA headquarters, McLean, Virginia. Number 3, NSA headquarters, Fort Meade, Maryland. And then he concluded, Jimmy, with this, quote, "They will bend in any direction to keep them secret." So when you're talking about bodies and debris and crash and the crown jewels, because that's what we're talking about here, we're playing with the big boys. These guys don't play games. They play for keeps. And you know how all this goes down. They will stop at nothing to keep the crash retrievals under wraps. And that's what we've seen recently. The UAP legislation in Congress got axed a second time, and they're going to keep on kicking this thing down the road here. Let's continue on. So we talked about the files. Now we want to talk about craft, location of where ET craft are being stored. This is from the same publication here. CIA headquarters, McLean, Virginia. MacDill Air Force Base, Tampa, Florida. I got that confirmed, Jimmy, by Naval combat veteran Jack Pickett, who saw 4 U.S. Air Force jet flying wing disc aircraft at MacDill Air Force Base back in September 1967. He said he walked into a large classified library where they had hundreds of official U.S. Air Force flying saucer photographs. These were 8x10 glossy black and white photographs. And he had an entire library full of canisters of motion picture film reels and gun camera footage. This was all in the library at MacDill Air Force Base. Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Goldsboro, North Carolina. So these are just 3 locations of where the craft are being stored. All this could go to congressional hearings. All right, so let's go to your case here. C-119 flying boxcar, Sierra Madre Valley, Mexico, prior to 1951. I believe this is, Jimmy, 1948 timeframe. Our witness is an engineer. He worked in highway construction. It's page 32 in Leonard's book. Now he talks about a 9-foot diameter disc-shaped craft. How do we know, Jimmy, that it was 9 feet in diameter? It's simple. Because if you take a tape measure and you measure the interior wall thickness of the cargo bay doors of the C-119 flying boxcar, it's 9 feet, 10 inches wide. Allowing for 5 inches of clearance on either side, you end up with a 9-foot diameter disc-shaped craft. Can't be any bigger than that. So this was a small craft. So here's Rudy's drawing of the military personnel kind of hoisting this craft into the clamshell bay doors of the C-119. We've got a ramp here, and we'll go to the next slide here. Here's Joseph Ray's full color rendering. This gives you an idea of what this scene may have looked like. He did see the bodies. They were small statured. This was not for the faint of heart. They were burnt very badly. Next slide here. I want to take everybody to the blow up. This is the full color rendering, shows you how they were bringing this into the aft cargo bay of the C-119. Now, when our primary eyewitness knelt down to touch the faces of the deceased corpses, we'll go to the next slide here. He said that when he touched their faces, their skin came off on his fingers. So they were in bad shape. But this is what's talked about from this firsthand military witness within Stringfield's publication here. Now, Naval Air Station in Sunnyvale, California, Hangar One. This is a radar operator, case B5, page 57. Now, a couple things to think about here. Number one, this is a large hangar. It's so large, it has its own weather. In World War II, they used this for blimp storage. This thing is so huge, you can drive down the road and see it off to the right. I've actually been in this hangar before. This thing is huge. So our radar operator, he kind of goes through these double doors. And what does he see inside? A large 100-foot diameter disc-shaped craft sitting on the hangar floor. This is all from the radar operator. He said it has a low-rise dome. There was a series of porthole windows wrapped around the outer circumference. He was challenged by a guard, probably was in there less than a minute, but he did see a large 100-foot diameter disc-shaped craft. And then he told his mother later, quote, "It was certainly no aircraft of ours." This is what he said. This is a radar operator. We've got his testimony within the publication. So let's go to the full color rendering. And this gives you an idea of what he may have seen in Hangar One back in 1950 inside this large blimp hangar here. Let's continue on to the next one. Now, Pentagon, 1952, off-limits room. Pentagon office worker. Page 152, case 1. So here we've got our Pentagon office worker. She goes down to what we believe the basement at the Pentagon. They do have a basement at the Pentagon. So she goes through this door. She's now in this dark, dirty, dusty, dingy room. It's poorly lit. There's some cardboard boxes off to the right. She does a 180-degree turn. And Jimmy, what does she see? Do you have any idea? What does she see?
What does she see?
She sees a pickled alien in a large glass jar. And she can't believe what she's thinking. Yep, we got this from
in
her.
The basement of the Pentagon.
Of the Pentagon, yes. Within a matter of 10 seconds, she feels this hand on her shoulder. It's a military guard telling her to get out of here immediately. You're not supposed to be here. But she did see a pickled ET in a glass jar. Now I'm going to go and hit you with the full color rendering. So this is my best rendering of what I could come up with of what this woman may have seen. Now here's the question. Is there a basement at the Pentagon where they could hide some of this information? Turns out, in point of fact, yes, there is. And how do we know that? Because our old good friend Dick Cheney got lost in the basement. So here we have Peninsula Times Tribune, March 25th, 1989. New defense chief gets lost in Pentagon basement.
Well done. Well done.
So,
well done.
Yeah, so
go ahead. That's the trifecta you're talking about. That's one leg of the trifecta.
Yep, that's right. That's right. So he was at a meeting on the upper level. He took the elevator thinking he'd be going down into the lower level to get his car. And when he got out, he was in the basement. So yes, it's confirmed there is a basement at the Pentagon. Okay. Fort Polk, Louisiana, summer 1953. Our primary military witness was a private in the Army, HJ. I do have his name. It's case A1, page 80 within Leonard's publication. So if anyone wants to follow along, it's page 80 in the book. So what he saw, and he saw this, Jimmy, from beginning to end, the entire retrieval operation. This was an egg-shaped craft that came down 30 feet across. It had a fin wrapped around the outer portion of the craft itself that was still rotating. Now, when he got on scene, he said that the ground was still hot to the touch. So this thing was still warm when it came down. He witnessed at least 3 ET bodies walking out of the entry hatch of this craft, being escorted by medics and medical personnel. They were assisting the ETs walking out. So we had our boys, our medics were assisting these ETs. There was another 4th ET being carried away in a stretcher to the ambulance car. Now, these guys were about 3.5 to 4 feet tall, oversized head, oversized eyes, slit for a mouth, minute nose. They were all wearing a one-piece tight-fitting green flight suit. They had mittens on. They were wearing a helmet. And Jimmy, it said in the report that they had no knee joint. They could only walk with their hip joints. So they had this staggered step maneuver as they're walking across the ground. I'm going to go to the next slide here. Here's
That's
Joseph
freaky.
rendering.
That would scare the crap out of you.
Yep. Very bizarre. Very bizarre.
Yeah.
Smoldering embers here. We've got the ambulance truck. We've got the military personnel. I'm going to blow this up so that people can get a little bit of a closer view here. Here you've got these ETs walking out with the medics assisting them. That's talked about in the report. Again, one-piece tight-fitting green flight suit. Here's their comrade that they were trying to communicate to as he's being carried off in the stretcher to the back of the ambulance truck. So that's how all this went down. I'm going to do one more blow up so everyone can kind of see what this looked like. Now, here's the question. So what happened to the survivors? This is a part of the report here. According to the source, the survivors had been sent to a hospital and put into isolation, but all soon died. He also learned that the cadavers were sent to a medical center near Washington, D.C. How many times have we heard about this medical location near Washington, D.C.? It's one place for sure. It is Walter Reed Army Medical Center. Keeps on popping up again and again. Pathologist reports, medical reports, autopsies, x-ray examination reports are leading back to this place for the examination of ET bodies. Another location, John Hopkins Hospital location of at least one ET autopsy. It's also talked about within Leonard's publication here.
I can see that. I could see Johns Hopkins being a part of it. Walter Reed, of course. That just makes a lot of sense. That's our top, as far as DoD goes. Walter Reed, the top military hospital, but Johns Hopkins is right at the forefront of all things medical research. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I would say that makes a lot of sense. Plus, it's right there in Washington.
Correct. So it's checking out the boxes. It's consistent with what the military witnesses are telling us. Next one, Wright Patterson Air Force Base, 1953, Army Reserves Warrant Officer, UFO Crash Retrievals, page 15, abstract number 8. So I want to give everyone the references of where I got this information. So hangar complex number 4, I believe it is at the same hangar complex where all this went down. Now, if you look at the upper right-hand part of this photograph, I've got the arrow showing you Hangar Bay E, which I believe is where this actually took place. And this is a photograph of Bay E. I've actually been inside this hangar. It's a vast complex, and it's period correct for the time. It's checking the boxes. Definitely something is going on with this hangar complex. So to kind of set the picture here, Jimmy, we've got a 4-engine DC-7 cargo transport plane taxis up onto the tarmac at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. This is back in 1953. Now, picture this entire scene taking place inside the hangar. So you've got the DC-7 taxis up on the tarmac. It rolls into the hangar. Hangar bay doors shut close. And then there's an aft cargo bay door opens up on the left-hand side of the DC-7. And there's a forklift that rolls up. And this forklift starts offloading these pallets. On one of these pallets, Jimmy, it had, according to the primary witness, it had 3 wooden crates with their lids open. And he's a couple feet away. And he's looking, Jimmy, over into these crates. And what does he see? He sees 3 ET bodies, all deceased, 3.5 to 4 feet tall, oversized head, oversized eyes, slit for a mouth, minute nose. They're all wearing a one-piece tight-fitting flight suit. He said one of them appeared to be female because it had breasts. It's talked about in the report. He also said that all 3 were being suspended off the bottom of the wooden crates by a white-colored netting to protect them from the dry ice freezer burn below. It's talked about in the report. He also saw them offloading different crates with debris from the crash retrieval operation. So what I want to do now is
Michael, why would the lid be off?
They were off. They were off. It's in the report. They were absolutely off. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's talked about in the report. He was close enough to see inside, and this is what he described. So I want to hit you with our full color rendering. And this is what Joseph Wright came up with just to give everyone an idea of what this may have looked like back in 1953. And you can kind of see the steam coming up from the dry ice as the preservation for the bodies themselves. So what I want to do now is I want to reverse the viewing angle. We're going to do a 90-degree look down view so that we can see directly down onto the ET corpses here. And this is what is described to Leonard by this warrant officer who was there in 1953 at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. So again, this body count keeps on going up as we progress through these cases here. Reference 16, alien autopsy performed at Walter Reed Hospital. The cadaver was described as being 3 feet in height with a large head, protruding brow, sunken eyes which wrapped around to the side of the face, very long arms, gray skin. Source pathologist at the Cleveland Clinic via Dr. Stanley Tytko, 1952 to 1953. So now we've got a second case of things being sent to Walter Reed Hospital here. Now, within Leonard's publication, there is a 3-page report on bullet items of what these ET autopsies in bodies look like when they're brought to these medical centers. They talk about all of the bullet items, what they actually look like from the medical personnel, from the pathologists, people who read the x-ray reports, pathologist reports. All of these are brought into a bullet item here. So I'm going to hit some of these over. 3.5 to 4 feet tall. What do these beings look like? 2 round almond sunken in eyes without pupils. Heavy brow ridge. Large hairless head by human standards. No earlobes. No definitive nose. Small slit for a mouth. Very thin neck. Small torso wearing a metallic flexible garment. Arms described as long and thin, reaching down to the knees. Hands having 4 fingers without thumb. Slight webbing. Short and thin legs, no toes. Skin color beige, tan, brown, tan, pinkish gray. So, Jimmy, if we took all of these bullet items from the medical doctors, from the pathologist reports, from the x-rays, from the autopsy reports, we put all these bullet items into a drawing, what are we going to get? We're going to end up with something that looks like this. This is, I believe, the best that we're going to get of what these ET corpses look like prior to autopsies when they're retrieved from the UFO crash retrieval. So we're hitting the bullet items. This is page 46, 47. We've got the oversized head. We've got the heavy brow ridge. We've got the almond-shaped wraparound eyes. We've got the emaciated body figures. We've got the hands that go down below the knees. We've got the webbing beneath the fingers and between the fingers. This is checking the boxes. So if we went to a full color rendering based on this drawing, we'll end up with something that looks like this. So you wouldn't want to see him on a Saturday afternoon or Saturday evening, but this is what the witnesses, this is what the witnesses are telling us that they're retrieving, and they're doing these autopsies on. This pops up multiple times within these pathologist reports here. And we can continue on here. This is Walker Air Force Base, New Mexico, April 12th, 1954. Now, Jimmy, I want to remind everybody that this is the same location as Roswell Army Airfield, home of the 509th Bomb Group members. We're talking about the same place. It was renamed Walker Air Force Base, New Mexico. So this is April 12th, 1954. Our primary eyewitness served in the Air Force between 1954 and 1955. He was a photographer. He was only 18 years of age. This guy was an expert in cameras, film, exposure, who knew everything about cameras. Anything that could ever be learned, this guy knew it. Page 82 in the book. So let's continue on here. Now, he and 3 others of his team were ordered to board an H-19 helicopter. When they all got into this helicopter, there was a announcement over the address system, and it said, quote, "Men, this is not a drill. This is a red alert scramble." So this is absolutely not a drill. This is the real thing here. So they take off, they head northbound. The main highway is off to their right. They fly to the northwest toward Corona, kind of in the direction of the original site back in 47. It's getting a little bit dark. They go over this low-rise hill, and when they go over this low-rise hill, what do they see? They see a 50-foot diameter dish-shaped craft augured in at a 45-degree angle. There was a low-rise dome on top. There were multicolored lights wrapped around the outer circumference that were still rotating. He's hovering above this thing in the helicopter, opens up the door. There's a spotlight shining down from the helicopter onto the scene, illuminating the entire area, and he starts snapping photographs of all this. So all this has been recorded. Now, when the helicopter lands and he gets out, there's one thing, Jimmy, that becomes immediately apparent. The entire area reeked with this pungent odor of automobile battery acid. It had
really?
Ammonia battery acid around the entire area, just pungent odor of battery acid. That was the first thing. Second thing is he saw lights and trucks and jeeps approaching. This was the beginning of the retrieval operation. He was told to get no closer than 40 feet, and he was told that the 4 bodies that he saw, in addition, there were 2 more bodies recovered from the interior of the craft, for a grand total of 6 ET corpses retrieved in this operation. So we want to go to the next slide, and that will take us to the full color rendering back in 1954, New Mexico, not too far from Corona, same location, 1947.
H-19. I love helicopters. H-19 is at the top of my list.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, classic, man. Just classic, man. Just classic.
It's old school. It's old school.
Oh, way old school, man.
Yeah,
love the H-19s.
That's right. All right, next one, spring 1955. I want to give credit to Ruben and Noe for doing all of the legwork. If it wasn't for these 2 guys, we wouldn't even know about this case. So this is south of Landry, Texas, Texas-Mexican border on the south side of the Rio Grande River. And what we've got, Jimmy, we've got 4 B-47s heading westbound. They're flying over southern Texas. They are escorted by 16 F-86 Sabres. That's what you see in this cover of the book here. All of a sudden, this dish-shaped craft comes screaming by right by their flight path. One of the F-16s peels away, which you see in this illustration here. And he's following this dish-shaped craft as it comes down, leaves a debris trail, and he does a low pass over this thing. He makes a 90-degree left turn. He's heading northbound. And where does he land? Here's our sight picture here. So you've got 4 B-47s. You've got 16 F-86 Sabre jets escorting the B-47s, all heading westbound. He makes a left-hand turn, and what he sees is where this thing came down is Eagle's Nest is the pinpoint in this map. if you go just south of Eagle's Nest across the Rio Grande River, you're going to locate this area within plus or minus 200 feet. We know exactly where this thing came down, just across that Rio Grande River, just south of the pushpin for Eagle's Nest. That's where this thing came down. So he heads north after he makes his left-hand turn. He lands at Carswell Air Force Base. He gets out of the F-86. He takes a car. He drives to Corsicana Airport. He's joined by a friend. They all hop in this Aranca tail dragger high wing. They take off. They fly back to the crash site because he knows where this is. He gets there before dark. And when he lands, this is what he sees. So we've got the Aranca on the right foreground here, 25-foot diameter dish-shaped craft, 5 feet tall. There was a dome that popped off that was still downrange. This thing was mangled and burnt, so this was not in good condition. There were at least, according to Rubin and Noe, 90 Mexican military personnel at the scene. And what he said next was very interesting to me, which I think lends credibility to the case. He said that the Mexican military were going to the back of the 6x6 covered troop transport, Jimmy, and they were taking out blankets, and they were laying the blankets down onto the hot debris, warming up the blankets, and then putting the blankets around their bodies to keep them warm as the night is progressing and they're getting colder. Now, our primary eyewitness walked up to the hull breach where he saw 4 ET bodies that were mangled and in not good condition. And here's what he said. This is Air Force pilot Robert Willingham. He said they had, quote, arms that looked like broomsticks. So this was not for the faint of heart. This was a gruesome scene. I'm going to take you one more step further here. Here's our full color rendering to give everyone an idea what this may have looked like back in 1955 timeframe. I'm going to do one zoom in here so that we can see the hull breach on the right side of the craft. Something like this was seen by our Air Force pilot military witness. Again, a gruesome sight, but this is what he describes within the book here. Now, Wright Patterson Air Force Base, 1955. Mrs. G, she is our primary eyewitness. She worked in the Foreign Materials Division at Wright Patterson Air Force Base back in 1955. Information provided to Leonard Stringfield via Charles Wilhelm. This is page 17 in the book, abstract 12. So again, I'm giving everyone the references of where I'm getting this information. So the best way to describe this case, Jimmy, is the closing scene to Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones, where you've got this huge warehouse with all these boxes and storage. And that's kind of where she worked, right? Let me go to the next slide here. This is Warehouse Building 258 at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. So this is like the correct area where she was. Now, here is what this woman did. This is Mrs. G. She cataloged 1,000 components that came in from the interior of a UFO that was recovered. Let me repeat that. She cataloged 1,000 components from the interior of a UFO crash retrieval. I mean, think about the implications of what this means here. So I said, Rudy, give me Mrs. G in a large warehouse. And the way they had this all set up, I'm going to go to the next slide here. And you can see our witness, Mrs. G, she's in the right foreground. The way they had this set up, Jimmy, is they had this set up like an assembly line. There was one guy, as the debris came in, one guy photographed this debris. And then it moved to the next guy. He bagged it and tagged it. And then it moved to Mrs. G, and she cataloged it. 1,000 components. Now, while all this is going on, there was this mobile dolly that kind of went right by her desk while she's doing all this cataloging. And she said she saw 2 deceased ET corpses in formaldehyde preservation fluid as this thing is going right by her. And so I said, Rudy, you know, we've got to get all of the shelving populated with all of this ET debris. So we've got all the shelving populated. We've got Mrs. G here. Now, just before she passed away, she told Charles Wilhelm, quote, Uncle Sam can't do anything to me once I'm in my grave. 6 months later, Jimmy, she died. So we just got her testimony in time.
Incredible.
She's an American patriot, an American hero, and we want to honor her testimony. Why would this lady be lying? You know. So
just one. Well, okay, just one crash retrieval, 1,000 pieces that she cataloged.
That's correct.
Right. That's just a very small part of the
correct.
pie. Very small piece of the pie.
So when we hear about senators and congressmen in these hearings, and they always tell us, well, we don't have any physical evidence, we don't have any proof. Mrs. G just cataloged over 1,000 components. So it's Mrs. G's word up against the congressmen and senators. They weren't even there. She was there. Now, to even add more references to this, here's our full color rendering that gives you an idea of what Mrs. G may have been involved in. So over on the left and right, we've got all the shelving, we've got the bodies, we've got the debris here. This may be what this warehouse building looks like back in 1955 timeframe here. Okay, now, June Crane. We want to talk about June Crane. She's known within this field. She grew up in Dayton, Ohio, worked for the United States Air Government between 1942 to 1952. She worked in classified laboratories. She had a Q clearance, held ET debris at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. Stated that by 1952, the U.S. government had been involved in 3 UFO crash retrieval operations. Spoke to a pilot that stated that he flew in ET bodies and wreckage. And she was very well aware of this. She eventually was interviewed multiple times by James Clarkson. He wrote an entire book about this called Tell My Story, June Crane, the Air Force and UFOs. Another reputable, credible witness, Jimmy.
Those books, some of the most riveting stuff I've ever read on the subject came from her.
Yep.
I mean, and she so detailed, so, first person, so matter of fact. It's just, June Crane. Incredible.
Absolutely. I want to honor her testimony for sure. So, actionable item. Since over 1,000 components of physical ET hardware exists, this evidence should be tracked down by senators and congressmen with the appropriate security clearances and should be presented in open public congressional hearings. That's what needs to happen. We need to get this actual physical hardware into open congressional hearings. All right, next one. Source, retired Air Force pilot, late 1950s. The person who conducted the interview was Ed Camarack Jr. Now, he interviewed the gentleman who is the Air Force pilot, who said that he saw a 5 to 6 minute movie film clip that depicted this very large dish-shaped craft in a hangar. There was a 10-foot wide gash on the side of it. There was the whole scene kind of flipped to another scene within the movie clip that showed you the interior display panels on the upper inside dome of the craft. And it had iconology, it had letters, it had symbols, there were star charts. This is all that cut to another scene. Now, it also showed within this large hangar, not only the craft, but there were at least 3 ET bodies laying on the hangar floor on stretchers covered by these small blankets. So that's what's talked about within this interview of the gentleman who saw the film clip.
Let me ask you something really quick. It seems that the damage, are we shooting at these craft?
There's another question, right?
Yeah, right. Well, you know your aircraft. You know what our capabilities were during this time period, and guided missile technology. That's years away. So the rockets that we had then were just point and shoot, right? And you crossed your fingers basically if it was from an aircraft. But it looks like these craft are damaged and something has blown up from the inside and caused an explosion that goes outwards. And it seems like we're shooting at them. I don't think that they're coming here and exploding or imploding right on their own.
Right. I would go back to Harry Drew, our good friend Harry Drew, who's no longer with us, but he talked about the 1953 Kingman, not crash retrieval, but forced landing, because there was a corridor near Kingman, triangulated corridor, where these craft would come through, and this craft somehow, the high-powered experimental radar system affected the navigation system of the craft, and this thing did a forced landing. However, the other thing we want to consider too, and this is where it gets a lot more dark and sinister, that it's very clear at this point, Jimmy, that there was a rogue group within the military industrial complex that was targeting, tracking, and shooting these things down for their free energy systems and their weapons development program systems as well. And that appears to be what's going on here. Here's kind of a blow up that shows you this display panel and what might be the actual propulsion system within the interior of the craft itself. Here's my full color rendering just to give people an idea what this 5 to 6 minute film clip might have depicted that this Air Force pilot stated that he saw. Now, next one, Wright Patterson Air Force Base, 1962. This was seen by 5 exchange pilots that were part of the 350th Tactical Air Command Fighter Wing. So we've got 4 fighter pilots here that saw this. Page 88 in the book, case A6. So it's 1962. These guys are jogging down the row of hangars, Jimmy. They're looking for the 4th wall to complete their handball court. So they're jogging down these hangars. One of these hangar doors is open up. They walk inside. They jog inside. What do they see? They see a 15-foot diameter disc-shaped craft propped up by 2 engine test stands. This thing is roped off, and then there's military guards with rifles guarding this thing. This is page 88, case A6 in the book. I'm going to go to Joseph's full color rendering just to give an idea of what this thing may have looked like. It had 2 engine test stands. Now, this case is interesting on its own, but I want to hit you with what one of these pilots said. And it's in Leonard's publication, which I think completely adds credibility. Why would these 5 Air Force pilots lie? This is something we want to consider here. Now, here's what he said. The guard challenged by saying, quote, "I don't think you're supposed to be here, sir." I replied to the affirmative, and we turned about face and departed, mumbling to ourselves that the good old U.S. had developed or had all along flying saucers in service. So here's another one of these cases. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Makes sense. Yep. Makes sense. I don't want to say too much. I'm going to make this quick so we can move on. I'm talking to another Harley rider. Okay. That I have met a few times. Right. And we're out in the desert. And he doesn't know anything about me. He just knows that I ride a bike. Right. And he said, "Man, I just got off work." And this is like 8 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
I said, "Really? What do you do? Work in the night shift?" And he goes, and I quote, "Are you ready?"
Yeah.
"I was tracking them aliens." I said, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm a contractor at Edwards."
Oh, really?
I said, "Tracking aliens? What do you mean?" He goes, "Yeah, it's, you know." And it was so offhanded the way he just said it. Very nonchalant, man. I didn't say anything further. Like, "Oh, guess what I do?" Right? No, I didn't do that.
Okay.
And I just left it there, and I'll see him again. But yeah, wasn't that interesting? You know,
Jimmy, did he use the term fast mover?
I can't. I don't want to do any exposure on this guy.
Okay.
No, I don't. I really don't.
Okay.
But that's, he said, "I was tracking them aliens." Yeah, just like that. The night shift at Edwards.
Interesting.
Okay. Anyway, moving on.
Okay, moving on. So Braniff International Airways. Why does this play a role in our content here? Because reference number 53, date 1963. So this is just a year after our Tactical Air Command fighter pilots saw a craft in 62. This guy, PJ, I have his name. He's a captain in the Navy. And then later he flew for Braniff International Airways. He encountered 2 flying saucers in a hangar at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. He said one was 30 feet in diameter and could hold 12. The other one was smaller and could hold 2 people. So now we've got technically 6 eyewitnesses, pilots that have seen flying saucers in hangars at Wright Patterson Air Force Base during the early 1960s. Okay, now I want to take everyone to Ryan's book, Magic Eyes Only. And this is Santa Rosa, New Mexico, spring 1963. It's page 217. in Ryan's book. And what we have here is a radar technician. Now, she was 24 years old at the time. She was not a registered nurse. She was an X-ray lab technician. A call came out from the dispatcher that there was a crash of an unknown object across town. So she, with the doctor, piled into one of these 1963 Ford Galaxy ambulance cars. They go across town and they get to this site. And the first thing they see when they get there, there's 2 squad cars there, 2 police officers there. She gets out of the ambulance car, walks up just off the vicinity of the road, kind of on this gravel area with some shrubs and grass. And she sees 3 ET bodies, 3.5 feet tall. And her very first statement was, quote, "Where are their parents?" She thought she was looking at children. That's what she thought, but they weren't children. So they loaded up the ET bodies into the back of the ambulance car. They drove the bodies back to the hospital. And here's where it gets bizarre here. Let me go to the full color rendering just to give everyone an idea of what this may have looked like by Thomas Jane. Want to give him credit. This was my full color rendering, a different version here. So just to kind of make this case come alive. But what's important is what this Air Force personnel told her. Now, within an hour of arriving at the hospital, the United States Air Force arrived and ordered all 3 bodies to be removed. They also confiscated all paperwork, notes, graphs, charts, and even undeveloped x-rays. The x-ray technician said she saw a flatbed truck outside with an object that was covered by a tarp. So not only, Jimmy, did they get the bodies and the records, they got the craft and wreckage too. So they got it all. Now, before this guy departed, this Air Force colonel told our X-ray technician witness, this is what he told her, quote, "This did not happen. You are never to speak about this. And remember this, the government has a long arm." So he definitely threatened her, no doubt about it. I mean, these guys don't play games when it comes to physical evidence like this. Okay, so let's go on to the next one here. 1963, Cherry Point, North Carolina, U.S. Marine, Roy Baker. UFO crash retrievals, page 152, case 2. That's in the book. So what you hear here is Cherry Point. I want to give everyone an idea where this is. This is just north of Havelock, Cherry Point, North Carolina. So our primary eyewitness, it's 1963, December 1963. Jimmy, this is literally weeks after President Kennedy was assassinated at Daley Plaza, November 22nd, 1963. He's told to board a plane with blacked out windows, and he flies 3 hours by plane from Cherry Point, North Carolina, to a location that he wasn't even aware of. He didn't even know. When he gets there, they go into this large hangar. Hangar doors open up, and he sees this 40-foot diameter dish-shaped craft, 15 feet tall. It's kind of got this fat hamburger look to it. There are 9 opaque elliptically shaped windows wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself. No visible means of propulsion, no welds, no socket head cap screws, no hex head cap screws, no markings. Now, he did say that there was the absolute slightest indication of a seam. That was an entryway hatch on the bottom of the craft. And he said, quote, "You could not put a razor blade between the seams. It was so fully integrated into the craft itself." Now, what you see here on the bottom view drawing here, Jimmy, is the red dots. That is the attempted point of entry with diamond tip drill bits, and they couldn't get in. So that's the second time we've heard of the diamond tip drill bits. Here's Joseph's full color rendering of what this craft looked like. This is all back in 1963 by this U.S. Marine. Now, there were 3 attempts to get in this thing. We want to talk about this here. Number 1, diamond tip drill bits, failed. Number 2, acetylene torches, failed again. Third attempt was with a laser, and that failed again. Again, this is December 1963. So all attempts to breach the hull of the craft failed completely. What you're looking at here, Jimmy, is not a reproduction or a copy. This is the actual sketch from the U.S. Marine who guarded this thing for a period of 2 weeks at an undisclosed location by plane 3 hours from Cherry Point, North Carolina. And I'm going to go over this in detail here. on the upper right and upper left-hand corners, you can see the lighting fixtures. The whole place was excruciatingly well lit. We've heard about that in multiple cases. The whole craft was propped up off the hangar floor on what looked like aircraft scaffolding. You could walk under this craft. They had a catwalk. You could walk around this craft. On the bottom of the craft, you see these black marks. These are the pads that support this thing. Now, if you look at the left of center opaque window, you'll see that dot, Jimmy. That is the attempted point of entry with the diamond tip drill bits. And again, this is the original sketch from the Marine who guarded it back in 1963. That Marine was interviewed in 1986 by a man named Michael Johnstone. I interviewed that guy about 13 years ago, did about a 3-hour videotape interview with him describing this entire case and how he talked to the Marine and what he was told. Here's his refined drawing that kind of gives you a little bit better of a refined idea of what this thing looks like. Now, if you look at the left of this thing, where the outer skin of the craft meets the elliptical window section, there's a 1-inch lip that you can feel with your thumb. That's what was described by the Marine. Let me go to my refined drawing here. This gives you an idea what this craft looks like. These are the scaffolding that they allowed this lab coat technicians could walk directly below this thing and walk around this thing as well. My bubble indented detail view shows you the 1-inch lip. This was talked about by the U.S. Marine. Now, directly below this craft, painted on the concrete floor, was a white circle. His job was to shoot to kill anyone who would breach that circle. No questions asked. Shoot first, ask questions later. Okay, so let's go. Here's Joseph Brace full color rendering. You can see the light lab coat technicians. Now, I question whether these were windows because they were opaque. You could not look through these. So I question if they were windows at all. We'll go on to the next slide. Here's John McNeil's. This is something I commissioned. Oh, it's been 15 years now since we've done this, but this gives you an idea of what this craft looked like with military personnel. He wasn't the only one there. They had multiple lab coat technicians. They all had color-coded badges on them. We'll talk about the badges. I'm going to move on to the next slide. So what I want to do now, Jimmy, is I want to take your audience through the entire facility, and we're going to look up the craft very closely. We're going to pretend that we're a fly on the wall, and we're going to penetrate this chain link fence here. So we're getting a little bit closer into the scene here, and we'll get a little bit closer, and you can see the lab coat technicians. There were some spook group types there. You see the military personnel. You see the light all shining down. You've got the craft on the scaffolding. You can see the outline of the white painted circle on the floor of the hangar. Let me go one more here. And now you can kind of see these elliptical shaped windows wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself. There were some CIA suitors that's talked about in the 4 pages of notes, handwritten notes that I got from Michael Johnstone, detailing this in great detail. Here's the elliptical shaped windows. You've got the white lab coat technician. You can see the hint of this little ridge that wrapped around the outer circumference of the elliptical shaped windows. This is a 45-degree look down angle showing you kind of the entire scene. We've got the catwalk. We've got the lab coat technicians. We've got the white painted circle. He was there with other personnel as well. And we've got the blue suiters off to the left here. Now, the last day he was there, because he was guarding it for a period of 2 weeks, he said that they were lifting it off its scaffolding. They were bringing it over on a crane, lowering it down to a cradle that was connected to an 18-wheeler tractor, and they were going to start putting tarps over this thing. So let me go to the next slide here. Here's this cradle device beginning the tarp process. And right now we're about 50% tarped. I'm going to go to the next slide here, and we'll see that we're completely tarped now, and we're going to move this thing to the next location. So what you can see, Jimmy, is the way they keep this under wraps is, number one, they compartmentalize the crash retrievals. And number two is they diversify their portfolio by moving these assets from location to location. So you might have something at Edwards North Base Complex. You might have something at Holloman Air Force Base. You might have something at Edwards North Base Complex, MacDill Air Force Base. They move
Now,
these things.
Michael,
Yep.
Michael, we have to end the show here, but we're only about halfway through.
Yep.
Can we get you back next week and we'll do a part 2?
Sure, we can do a part 2. Yes, we can.
Okay, I'll have Michelle reach out to you tomorrow. This is too important not to do.
Okay.
Great presentation tonight.
Thank
This
you.
is part 1, everybody. We'll do part 2 next week, and we'll make the announcement over the weekend. Michael,
Roger that.
man, it was great hanging out with you again, my man.
Great to be with you, Jimmy.
Perfect show tonight. I want to thank you for everything, all of your hard work and everything that you have done for our community and the rest of the world over the years. And where can everybody reach out to you if they've got something that they need to get to?
No problem. You can get me by Facebook. I'm on X. I have a YouTube channel, which is just my name, Michael Schratt. And then I have a book called Dark Files, A Pictorial History of Lost, Forgotten, and Obscure UFO Encounters, and it's up on Amazon.
You're the best. Michael Schratt. We'll do part 2 next week, everybody. Stand by for that. We'll make the announcements over the weekend. Michael, enjoy the rest of your evening. Perfect show tonight.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Roger that. Yep.
The best. Michael Schratt, everybody. This is part 1. We've got a lot more to cover, and we will finish it up next week. And so with that, I get to start my weekend, everybody. So I want you to enjoy yourself, have a great, safe, fun, and amazing weekend, and I'll see you back here on Monday. For now, all I've got is go Berkeley Tappy. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go Berkeley Tappy.